Talking about the Diabetes Nutrition Education Program adapted for Native people with type 2 diabetes called What Can I Eat? Presented by yours truly and Sarah Stotz, my Nutrition Native ally. All right, we did want to end the presentation to recognize and acknowledge our whole What Can I Eat team. We want to specifically acknowledge and thank Dr. Kelly Moore, who was the project leader and principal investigator for this study, and our host today, the Shakopee Mdewakanton Sioux community, for their vision and support. I think that's longer than 20 seconds. Okay. We have 3 learning objectives listed here and hope that by the end of this presentation, you will understand and appreciate, as much as I do, the What Can I Eat program and how we incorporated community feedback in the development of the program. And we know that nutrition education is one of the cornerstones of diabetes self-management and care. A healthful diet rich in fruits, vegetables, whole grains, and traditional foods can help improve diabetes health. Nutrition education can also support people to eat healthy on a budget, which can help with decreasing food insecurity. The American Diabetes Association created What Can I Eat? They partnered with the Shakopee Mdewakanton Sioux community with the vision of adapting this program for Indigenous people with diabetes. To do this, they worked with Dr. Moore's team at the University of Colorado, and the rest of our talk will describe how community voices informed this adapted program, which includes 5 in-person interactive nutrition-specific lessons led by a trained nutrition professional. Each class includes hands-on activities, physical activity, a mindful eating activity, and focuses on eating traditional foods. Topics include healthy eating on a budget, managing healthy eating in social situations, and using the diabetes plate method. Here's a timeline. The project took place over 4 years. It was supposed to be 3, but COVID caused some delays in the pilot part of the program. And we'd like to note that during the development phase, we relied on learning from existing programs such as Cherokee Choices from Eastern Band Cherokee and the Medicinal Project from Cheyenne River Sioux. And these are the wonderful communities who we collaborated with and who provided feedback and recommendations as to how to adapt the original What Can I Eat program for Native people. And we talked with a lot of different people and community members. Next, Sarah is going to walk you through these recommendations and how we adapted the program.
Great, well thank you, Kelly. And so the next few slides, you'll see a little blue chunk on each slide, and that's the actual recommendation. And then the following slide will give you an example of how we incorporated that feedback. The first one is just a reminder that we're not dealing with a homogeneous audience. Of course, there's diversity among American Indians and Alaska Natives. And so we wanted to make sure that the class reflected the ability for a facilitator to choose which lesson perhaps works for any given audience and emphasize specific traditional foods to that community. So there's several places where the facilitator can select a portion of the lesson that he or she or they may want to swap out to better meet the needs of that audience. We also heard a key finding was that we needed to build on the strengths of traditional foods, as everyone in this room knows. And they also recommended that we don't just focus on the individual person who has diabetes, but that we really try to promote healthful eating for whole communities, whole families, especially for families with young children. So to promote traditional foods in the program, we have many places where traditional protein foods are emphasized, for example, traditional ways of cooking, traditional teas. We drew on some existing recipes to provide those in appendices for folks to rely on. Another key finding was that we were told that social gatherings and celebrations are important, but food at those events is not always the most healthy food. And so they really wanted, the people that we spoke to really wanted us to help cultivate a space of health and nutritional health in these social gatherings. So we have a lot of places in the curriculum where it's talked about how to eat healthfully outside of the home. And we're not talking at restaurants necessarily, but at places where people gather, at parties, at celebrations, at tribal events, where there's food, and how can we cultivate that to be a healthy space for people who have diabetes and also for people who don't have diabetes but just want to eat healthfully. Another key finding is that folks have barriers to eating healthfully. Every single one of us in this room has had a challenge to choose a healthy food. Some of those that came up were environmental, such as access to healthful food. Some of it was need for nutrition education, and that was especially apparent among some of the younger families that we spoke to, the younger parents. So we really tried to address those barriers in the curriculum and help folks with things like food resource management, which helps plan both with time and with money how to make the best of healthy meals at home, how to use commodity foods if that's something the community was using, and again, how to eat healthfully on the go, especially for those young parents who had diabetes and still needed to care for their children. Some of the examples from the program of how we adapted to this curriculum, again, those facilitator selected lessons were really important. We have meal planning calendars, grocery shopping lists, templates, and ideas to just cook at home on the go and quickly. And then the final recommendation is really specific to the educator. We were told by the people we spoke to that the educator really ought to be American Indian Alaska Native him or herself, and that if not, that person should be really, really well connected to the community and a well-trusted member. So the way we accommodated this, and I know you can't read this, but the whole entire curriculum is very, very scripted. And so someone that's not a registered dietitian nutritionist could most certainly teach this program. We have very specific cues for what to say, what to do, what to ask, questions and answers, and little resources for the facilitator all throughout the curriculum. And this leads us to our next steps, which will be to provide the finalized program to the ADA for dissemination. We also want to evaluate with in-person classes. The pilot was completely online via Zoom because of COVID, so we want to model the in-person classes, and then also evaluate with an added food security resource for folks who experience limited food security. Thank you so much. We did it.
Yeah, we did it. Yay!